This is my entry for the horror movie short. The idea is that it's all in the artist's head, but I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. The year is 1888. London is drowning in fog and gaslight. In a dingy attic room lived a young artist named Elias, or Lee, to those few people he was close with. He had a handsome face framed by unruly brown hair and dressed in clothes too fine for his station in life, which was only surpassed by the quality of his art. His paintings were the talk of the town. They said he had an otherworldly talent, the kind that could only be bestowed upon him by the devil himself. To some this was just praise, but to Lee it was a curse. See, he didn't believe in God, but he sure as hell believed in the devil. One rainy afternoon, while sitting in his garret and painting, he saw a cloaked figure standing in the corner of his eye. At first, he assumed it was just another figment of his imagination, but the longer he looked, the more solid the man seemed to become. With a deep breath, Lee decided to ignore it and went back to his work. But the man wouldn't leave. As he continued to stand there silently, watching Lee paint, Lee grew angrier and threw his brush down in frustration. "What are you?" he shouted at the corner. "Leave me be!" The man stepped into the light, and though he couldn't see his face, Lee could hear the smirk in his voice. "You already know what I am, don't you, Elias? I am your dark side, the part of you that craves power and recognition." "Don't call me by my name," Lee spat back. "I won't have you tainted with your filthy lips." The man laughed, a low rumble that echoed through the room. "Ah, so you will deny me, yet you cannot deny the power I give you. I am the reason for your success, your fame. Without me, you are nothing but a pathetic excuse for an artist." Lee took a step back. "That may be true, but I don't need you. I can do this on my own." And with that, he picked up his brush and painted furiously. The man watched him, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Very well then," he said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "But don't come crying to me when your light goes out." And with that, he vanished. Painting after painting, Lee made a name for himself, though he never forgot about the strange occurrences in his attic. Years passed, and his art became more and more popular. Soon enough, people were clamoring to get their hands on his pieces, and he was raking in the money. Still, there were nights when he would wake from nightmares drenched in sweat, the memory of the cloaked man still fresh in his mind. There were times when he would catch his reflection in a mirror or see his own shadow in the corner of his eye and swear it moved on its own. Sometimes he would even hear his name being whispered in the darkness, and every time he turned around, there was no one there. So he pushed it all out of his mind and threw himself into his work. After all, he had a reputation to uphold. Then came the night when everything changed. Lee was working late on a new piece, the centerpiece of his next exhibition. The gaslights flickered, casting long shadows across the floor. The rain was coming down in sheets, drumming against the window panes. Outside, the wind howled like a hungry wolf. Suddenly, the room was plunged into darkness. A bolt of lightning flashed, followed by a deafening roar of thunder. Lee cursed under his breath. Of course, it had to happen tonight of all nights. As he fumbled for a candle, he heard a knock at the door. He froze. Who could that be at this hour? Was it one of his patrons come to gawk at their favorite artist at work? The knocking continued, insistent, demanding. Lee wanted to ignore it, but something compelled him to get up and investigate. As he approached the door, the knocking stopped. Was it a trick? Cautiously, he opened it a crack and peered out into the darkness. There was no one there. Perhaps it had been the wind. Just as he was about to close the door, he heard a small voice behind him. "Let me out!" Startled, he whirled around. "Who's there?" His eyes fell on his shadow cast by the candlelight on the wall. It was detached from his body, taking on a life of its own. "I said, let me out," the shadow repeated, its voice deeper now. Lee's eyes widened in disbelief. What was happening? How could his shadow be talking to him? Then he remembered the cloaked man, the one who claimed to be his dark side. Could this be what he had been hinting at all those years ago? Before Lee could respond, the shadow began to move, slithering towards the door like a snake. It hissed at him, its eyes glowing red. "Let me out, Elias. I want to see the world." Lee recoiled in horror. "You can't do this. You're just a shadow." The shadow stopped and turned to face him, its features twisted into a sneer. "We'll see about that," it said, and with that, it vanished. Lee stared at the spot where his shadow had been a moment ago, his mind racing. What had just happened? Was he going insane? He looked down at his hand. It was shaking. He closed his eyes, trying to calm his breathing. When he opened them again, he saw his shadow back on the wall. But it was different. It was darker, more defined. Then he noticed something else. It wasn't attached to him anymore. His shadow was free. Lee felt a sense of dread wash over him. He knew somehow that his life would never be the same again. The next morning, Lee awoke in his bed, disoriented and confused. The events of the previous night seemed like a fever dream. He got up and walked to the window. The sky was clear and the sun was shining. For a moment, he couldn't remember anything. Then it all came flooding back. His shadow. Where was it? He turned to his easel and gasped. There was a new painting there, one he didn't recognize. It depicted a shadowy figure standing in the corner of a room, watching him paint. And then it hit him. This was the reason for his success. This was the dark side of him. But what did it want? As the days passed, Lee became increasingly paranoid. He started seeing his shadow everywhere, in the cracks of the walls, in the depths of his own eyes. He was sure it was watching him, waiting for him to make a move. He tried to distract himself with his work, but nothing seemed to help. The more he painted, the more his shadow grew stronger. It was like a tumor in his mind, consuming him from the inside out. Lee began to lose weight. His skin grew pale and his eyes hollow. He hadn't realized how much he relied on his shadow until it was taken away. Then one night, it happened again. Lee was in his studio, surrounded by his paintings, when he felt a presence behind him. He turned around and saw his shadow detaching itself from his body. It slithered towards him, coiling around his legs. He screamed and tried to kick it away, but it was no use. His shadow was too strong for him. It lifted him off his feet and carried him through the streets of London. Lee struggled against it, but it was like trying to fight the wind. Finally, it stopped in front of a large building. It released Lee and slithered inside. He collapsed onto the ground, too weak to move. As he lay there, he heard voices. They were coming from inside the building. Gathering what little strength he had left, Lee crawled towards the source of the noise. He peered around the corner and saw his shadow standing in a circle of people. It was talking to them, but they couldn't hear it. All they saw was Lee's shadow dancing in the air. He watched as they entered the building, drawn in by his shadow's silent call. Suddenly Lee understood. This was it. This was why he had been chosen. His shadow needed him. He stumbled forward and called out to it, but his voice was hoarse and weak. His shadow turned and looked at him, its eyes glowing red. Then it smiled, a cruel, mocking smile. "Goodbye, Elias," it hissed, and with that, it vanished.